You ever wonder how two historians can look at the very same event and tell completely different stories about it? Well, in this explainer, we're going to break down the toolkit they use to make sense of the past. And you might be surprised how it changes the way you see your own life. So, our journey into the historian's mindset, it really all starts with a single, surprisingly deep question. It's a question that gets right to the very core of how they look at the world. No, seriously, think about it for a second. Why are you right here, right now, watching this? What whole chain of events, big and small, led you to this exact moment in time? Okay, so your first thought is probably the most obvious reason, right? Maybe a teacher assigned this, or you just happened to click a link out of curiosity. That's what historians call the spark. It's the immediate surface level cause. But let's dig a little deeper. Maybe you're here because you genuinely believe that education is absolutely crucial for your future. Or maybe it's because society has taught you that being an informed citizen is valuable. All of a sudden, that simple little click is tied to these much, much larger forces, the whole social context. And that right there, that's the fundamental job of a historian. They never, ever stop at the first easy answer. They're kind of like detectives, always peeling back another layer to uncover this complex web of causes behind every single thing that happens. So, if you've got all these layers of why, how in the world do you keep them all organized? Well, historians use this really powerful framework to sort through it all. It's all about understanding the different levels of causation. Causation is really just a fancy word for the why behind any event. But here's the key thing to remember. Historians know that not all causes are created equal. They actually rank them to build a much clearer picture, and they often think about it like a pyramid. This slide is a perfect example of how that pyramid works with a massive event. The attack on Pearl Harbor. That was the primary cause, the immediate spark that lit the fire. But that fire wouldn't have even caught without all the fuel that had been piling up for years. Things like the secondary causes, Roosevelt wanting to help Britain, and the even deeper tertiary causes, like the entire global power struggle happening at the time. All right, so if we have all the facts and we've mapped out all the causes, the story's done, right? We're finished? Well, not so fast, because the entire narrative can totally change depending on one crucial choice: who you decide is the main character. And that choice, that idea of a main character, it throws us right into one of the oldest debates in the entire field of history. What, or maybe who, is the real engine of historical change? For a very, very long time, the answer seemed pretty simple. You had thinkers like the 19th century historian Thomas Carlyle, who basically said that history was all about the great men. The kings, the generals, the powerful leaders whose big decisions shaped the world. But then you have this completely different perspective from people like the novelist Leo Tolstoy. He argued that no, it's the general mass of men, the everyday people, whose collective actions are the real force. In his view, a leader isn't really shaping the masses. The leader is actually being controlled by them. So here's the critical takeaway from all this. Both of these theories can look at the exact same event and come up with two totally different stories. And that proves something really important. History isn't just a list of facts. It's an act of interpretation. Okay, so if history is an act of interpretation, then we've got to understand the tools of interpretation. And that means we need to look at the different lenses that historians use to make sense of the past. A huge part of this is just recognizing that we're all walking around wearing glasses we don't even know are there. These are social constructs. They're these powerful, often invisible ideas about things like class or gender or race, you name it, that feel totally normal to us, but were actually built by our society. And they quietly influence every single interpretation we make. And this slide just brilliantly shows how different lenses can completely change the story. Take colonial Latin America, for example. A progressive historian might zoom in on the growth of legal systems. A social historian, they're looking at daily life, what people were eating, who they were marrying. A Marxist historian sees class struggle everywhere, while a gender historian is focused on the role of gender. Each lens reveals a totally different but still valid piece of a much larger puzzle. So you see the problem, right? The real danger is getting trapped looking at the world through only one of those lenses. A truly rich and honest understanding of the past only starts to emerge when we learn how to layer these lenses and combine all their different views. So, what's the end goal here? Where does all this stuff, understanding causation, using different lenses, where does it actually lead us? What's the point? It leads to something that is incredibly difficult, but absolutely essential. It's called historical empathy, and it's the challenge of trying to see the world through the eyes of people from the past, without judging them by our own modern standards and attitudes. Because at the end of the day, a historian's job isn't to be a judge of the past, it's to be a guide. Their job is to present what happened as clearly and as completely as they can, to help us understand why people made the choices they did within the context of their world, not ours. So you see, thinking like a historian does way more than just change how we see the past. It forces us to look at our own lives, our own society, and all the evidence we're creating every single day. And it leaves us with one final, pretty challenging question: what story will the historians of the future tell about us?